So just a little over a year ago at this point, we got to see the reveal of a brand new game, Redfall, a co-op slash single player shooter from the folks over at Arkane Austin. We know the game will be an Xbox and PC exclusive and is set to launch only on current generation hardware as far as the consoles are concerned. And this year, we got a huge deep dive into what to expect from Redfall, and I'll be discussing all the details in today's video, so let's get started. So when Redfall was revealed at Xbox's showcase back in 2021, people were pretty quick to jump to the conclusion that it'll just be a Left 4 Dead clone that fails to live up to the original, much in a similar manner to last year's Back 4 Blood. Well, I was never one to jump into that line of thinking, because Arkane really is my favorite developer, and I know for a fact that everything they do is completely unique to them. Even if they were to do a Left 4 Dead clone, it would be different. But I was never really worried about them doing a Left 4 Dead clone, because Arkane is probably the best studio in the game, at least in my opinion, when it comes to level design. And they're high on the list when it comes to interactivity with your environment. You get a level of immersion in an Arkane game that just isn't present in most games. You're guaranteed to see or do something at least once in an Arkane game that makes you stop and say, holy I can't believe that happened. And just a short time after this year's Xbox showcase, Harvey Smith, the game designer for Redfall, sat down at IGN to talk about his game, and there's plenty to talk about not only from that interview, but from the initial gameplay reveal itself. And that's exactly where I'm gonna start, because I breathed a deep sigh of relief when I saw Redfall gameplay. The guns look awesome, shots look impactful, enemies look like they provide a good challenge, the classic Arkane flair is there with the powers and abilities. It really was giving me Borderlands vibes, which is fantastic, and it makes sense because we got those Redfall leaks late last year talking about how we should expect it to play more like Borderlands than Left 4 Dead. But I also want to talk about the visuals here, because in my opinion, it's a super important aspect of any Arkane game. See, Arkane doesn't make the most photorealistic games. Their goal has never been incredible fidelity. Instead, Arkane likes to focus on making their own very specific art style look as good as it possibly can. And they've managed to one-up themselves every single game ever since Dishonored back in 2012 on the 360, the PS3, and the PC. In fact, I'll have some screenshots or maybe even gameplay going in the video right now, just to showcase what I'm talking about, and hopefully what I'm showing will help explain what I mean when I talk about Arkane's art style. And yeah, it's very detailed, but at the risk of sounding kind of like a douche, it's also very artsy. It's not going for hyper-realism, but it's also not going for super cartoonish. I think the best way I can describe it is like a very detailed painting come to life, and that's one of the things I find so admirable about their games, and I'm pleased to see that Redfall is very much a product of that art style. But now it's time to talk about Harvey Smith's interview with IGN and all the little details we got from it. So first I want to talk about co-op versus single player, because for some reason a game gets a bad rap when it's announced as a co-op game among the hardcore community of gamers. But Arkane was very quick to assure us that the game could be played either solo or with friends. And what's cool is that if you decide to play solo, it will be your classic Arkane experience. You don't have to worry about being placed in a match with bots, sidekicks, or any of that extra stuff. If you play solo, it's just you in the open world with your enemies, and that's something that's super nice and really relieving to hear. I think it's also important that since it's co-op, we talk about progress in this game and how that works in co-op versus single player. Because this is really the only thing that I was disappointed to hear, and that's the fact that if you play a co-op match hosted by someone else, that progress doesn't carry over to your save. So if I hop in with a buddy on their game and play a few levels with them, then I don't make that progress in my game. Now, I'll still have all the loot and stuff that I have for my character progression that I gathered in my friend's co-op game, but I won't have made any story progress in my own game. And like I said, I'm not exactly thrilled to hear this, but for me personally, I will be playing through this game solo my first go around, so it's not too big of a deal for me. You will also be able to play with a friend who is using the same character as you, and it doesn't always mean you'll both be playing the same roles, because we can both be the same character, but your character might have different remnants or weapons, which we will talk about here in a second, but you might have different remnants or weapons than I do, which encourage you to play a different way than I might play. You also have the ability to bring your endgame character into your buddy's game, even if he's just starting the game for the first time. So I could beat the game and then come in and help you wipe out a level really quick just because I'm a super high level. And you know, that can be annoying sometimes if you just constantly abuse that power, but it can also be super helpful for someone who is struggling. But now we can finally talk about powers, which is a staple of any Arkane game, and Redfall is no different in that aspect. We heard Harvey Smith say during the IGN interview that every character has 3 primary powers that are able to be upgraded, as well as passive powers and skills. And the example he used for this was a character named Defender who has a power called Blacklight, where the character throws down a staff of light into the ground and it completely freezes the vampires surrounding them. And we also saw that Layla has this sort of ethereal umbrella that seems to be able to not only shoot enemies back, but also be used as a shield from incoming fire from human enemies. There will be 4 playable characters in Redfall, and I'm just going to go through each of them really quick. Up first is Jacob Boyer, who's the guy we've always seen in the trailers with a sniper rifle and that hood over his head. Then you've got Remy De La Rosa, who's an engineer and has that little 2-legged robot that follows her around. Then there's Devender Krausley, or Cruisley, I'm not entirely sure how to say that, who we actually just talked about, who uses that blacklight power to turn vampires into hardened ash. And then finally there's Layla Ellison, who looks like she'll probably be my favorite character of the bunch because she has these telekinetic powers. And also, we saw that in the latest trailer from just a few days ago, there is a skill tree in this game, which is definitely always a nice touch for a game like this. You're also going to be able to customize your character loadouts, and judging by the endgame menu UI, it looks like weapons have tiers, kinda like they do in Deathloop. Harvey also talked about weapons in the game and how they are leveled up as you go throughout the game, as well as the fact that weapons have rarities. And this sounds an awful lot like it could be similar to weapon trinkets from Deathloop. But I'm unsure at this time because they really didn't specify that in the interview, but you know, maybe they make your weapons operate a little differently than they would normally. And there's also these things called remnants that sound like they have the ability to charge items you may be carrying with powers, and maybe this is the thing that I should be comparing to the trinket system from Deathloop, but who knows, only time will tell. Regardless, I'm happy to hear that there's a level of depth with the weapon system in this game, and it's not just here's a gun, go shoot the bad guys kind of thing. And up next, we've got some information on the open world. And the first question that was asked is, how big is the open world really? And apparently it's pretty huge. In fact, interestingly enough, Harvey said that it had to be scaled down a bit because it was just too big. He also says the world is divided into 2 districts, with the first half of the game taking place in the downtown part of Redfall, whereas the later half of the game takes place in a more rural part of Redfall. The game also does feature nests that lead you into this world where it's sort of the layout of Redfall mixed with the tripped out consciousness of a conglomerate of vampires, and if you're like me, then that probably sounds insane and maybe even a little hard to understand. But basically, from what I understand, these nests are like the connected consciousness of the vampires that have invaded Redfall as their minds are tripping on something called the blood trance, and in the nests, the rules that apply to the outside world don't always apply inside the nest. And that explains why when we were watching the gameplay trailer at the showcase, they went into this movie theater, instead of being a screen like there is in a normal movie theater, there was just this trail that led into some misty woods. And stuff like that just sounds really cool to me, if I'm being honest. And what makes it even better is that at the center of these nests, you'll find these giant glowing hearts that have super powerful psychic remnants to use on your character, so you will be getting something out of exploring these things other than just, hey, here's a nest, go explore it. He also talked about how they're using environmental storytelling to lead you to various upgrades you may find throughout your playthrough. He gave an example of maybe finding a body on the street and then following a blood trail up to the roof where the person had been camped out, where you can now find various helpful items, whether it's weapons or maybe even items you can use for distractions or whatnot. He says that they've tried very hard to make sure that the loot you find is appropriate for the place in which you find it. For example, you'll find a remnant when you search the ashes of a vampire, but you're more likely to find military items or weapons when searching a soldier, or you might find civilian weaponry when you lockpick a trunk or something. Now, this is just all the info I've got from the gameplay and from the IGN interview with RB Smith, but I'm sure as we get closer to the release date in 2023, we'll probably be getting plenty more news for this game, and I'm going to be covering it every step of the way because I really am excited for this game. But I want to hear from you folks in the comments. Let me know how you feel about Redfall after finally getting to see gameplay this year. Tell me if you're excited, if you're not excited. Leave a comment down below. Leave a like if you liked the video. And please remember to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell if you want to stay up to date on all my latest videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.